The Poet Speaks podcast is sponsored by the Poetry Lab. Poetry Lab partners attend a monthly workshop led by a teaching artist who represents a fresh new voice in the writing world. The goal, now more than ever, is to hold space for poets to write, read, and craft their learning journeys in a supportive community. And it's only $35 a month. Sign up at thepoetrylab.com/lab partners. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Poet Speaks podcast, the #1 spoken word podcast in the world. And today we have a very, very, very special guest. Our next guest is a Chinese-Scottish lesbian writer concerned with intimacies. Her first pamphlet, The Red Ego, was published in 2019 with Wild Press Books. And her second pamphlet, Natural Sugars, was published in 2020 by Broken Sleep Books. Her debut collection, Your Turn to Speak, is due to be released in 2023 with Blue Diode Press. Please welcome to the podcast, Lady Red Ego. Lady Red, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm great. Hello, everybody.
So nice to see you. So tell us a little bit, where are you currently located right now as we're talking right now? Where is your current location?
So I'm currently in Scotland. It's where I grew up. Scotland, Glasgow.
Ooh, all right, Scotland, Glasgow. Ooh, all right. So I think you were the first person. See, we've had Stephen James Smith. He's from Ireland. So you're the first person from Scotland. You're the first person. I know Scotland and Ireland are not the same, but you are the first person from Scotland that we've ever had on the show. So we are so happy to have you here. So let's start off with, let's just begin to go straight into it. Lady Red Ego, your name. Let's start off with that. Where did that name come from? Lady Red Ego, such a unique, beautiful name. Please tell us, where'd you conceive that name from, that moniker?
So I was originally publishing my stuff under my real name, April Hill. And then I published my first pamphlet, The Red Ego. And there's a poem in it called Lady Red Ego. It's not called Lady Red Ego, but there's a phrase in it called like Lady Red Ego. And kind of like after, I think maybe like a year or two of like doing poetry, I kind of decided I wanted to move away from using my real name, partly just for like the like camp dramatics of it, but I also wanted to make it more overt that the voice of my narration is not literally me, because I write a lot about quite personal things, and I think people also tend to assume from the nature of my writing that it's always about like my literal real life, and I wanted to kind of move away from that and have it be this kind of like dramatic persona and this kind of like alter ego that is speaking to the audience. And I think also partly because like I like my name, but like as a Chinese and Scottish writer, sometimes I have mixed feelings about using like my English name. So I wanted something that just wasn't so attached to like the name April, like my personal, like, I think people kind of like from my name, like April Hill, you would probably assume that I'm not Chinese. So I wanted something completely separate and something that was like obviously a pseudonym.
So I'm curious. So I love that. So it's something so separate from yourself, but kind of speaking more about yourself. You are Chinese and Scottish. Those are two completely very different cultures. What does that look like for you? How has that affected your artwork? How is that kind of those two cultural backgrounds merging together? That is you. What has that meant for your artwork? What has that meant for your writing? What has that meant for just everything that you've touched in terms of your art? What is that, those two very different backgrounds forming together?
I think my experience is very much like, I like to say Chinese and Scottish because the experiences that I write about are very much grounded in like, I think the Chinese diaspora experience, and not the kind of like I don't know, I think sometimes people kind of feel quite picky about what's considered like actually Chinese, or like, like I think the things I write about are very much about growing up here and what it means to be Asian, like in Scotland.
Mm.
And I think it's affected my work in that a lot of the writing I do about being othered and about body and queerness are very much about my race just as much as they are about my like sexuality. And I think those things are like very linked in my work. And sometimes people don't read the race side as well. But it's this feeling of alienation. Like one of my huge inspirations for a lot of my work is Anne Carson's The Autobiography of Red.
Mm.
And the things she has written about Geryon. I don't know if you've read it.
No, I haven't had the opportunity. I'm intrigued by what you're getting at though.
So she kind of rewrites the story of Geryon, who is one of the monsters that Heracles slays.
Mm.
In the original myth, he is this like monster who lives on an island and like eats sheep, and like it's very heroic when when Heracles slays him, and she rewrites him as this like young gay teenage boy who grows up and his like skin is red. And she rewrites him as this person who's just like really struggling to integrate into society and really struggling to form romantic and platonic relationships with people and to fit into his family and all of that. And I think like in a lot of my work, like The Red Ego and in my next collection, Your Turn to Speak, like that's been a huge influence because I think the intersection of being Asian and queer and a lesbian, those aren't separate things. You know, those kind of work together to create the feelings and the alienation that I talk about in my work.
I find that very fascinating. So you really do, because it's a lot of writers, I guess they would coin it as they play upon their identity. But for you, your identity, that's not something you play upon. You literally, that's so centralized to your work. All these things happening at once is what's really central to why you write and why it's so important. So going kind of more deeply into that, I'm just so intrigued. Chinese person in Scotland, what is that? Do you meet a lot of Chinese people in Scotland? I have no idea. What is that kind of growing up in that area? You said Glasgow, growing up in that area, were there many Chinese people that look like you, people sharing that similar identity?
So Glasgow does have a large Chinese population, and it has a large diaspora from Hong Kong. My mom, so I'm half Chinese, my mom is from mainland China. And increasingly now there's a lot of like in particular students from mainland China over here. But in terms of people who are like second generation and who have been raised here, I think there's less of us. I think like I think the kind of diaspora population here is quite new in the sense that like for me and the peers I know, like we're kind of the first generation that's really like grown up here as like British Chinese. Yeah, but it's like it's interesting. I think Scotland is quite a white place. Like it's a lot more white than America, and I really enjoy and engage with a lot of Asian American work, but their experience is so different. I think having grown up in a place where like it's often more diverse, where like for me, like where I grew up, where I lived, and like where I went to school, like in my school, I was like one of 3 Chinese girls and one of like 5 woman of color at all in my year.
Wow, wow. Yeah. Wow. So it's a very kind of, so you kind of, because you had earlier talked about your writing really deals with that kind of isolating feeling that you've had. So, okay, so like, let's go back even farther. So for you, when did poetry introduce itself to you? When did that become something, speaking on these experiences that you've had with your identity, with who you are? When did that now click for you? Hey, you know what? I should start writing. I should start putting pen to paper, start making poetry. When for you did that click? Was this in childhood or was this maybe a little later on in life?
Um, I think I've always liked writing. I always wanted to be a writer, which I know a lot of writers say.
Yeah.
It is unfortunately true. Um, I kind of started writing poetry when I was maybe about like 14. And it was like less like it was less like a conscious decision to write poetry, and it was more just like that was I'm not very like into journaling or anything like that. I find it very monotonous. So poetry was kind of like an easier medium for me to express myself. And I didn't really take it seriously until I started getting published. I didn't really think that,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't really think a real thing that people still did.
Wow. What made you have that mindset though, that you didn't think it was a real thing that people still did? What made it, because I find that interesting. Until you got published, you didn't take it seriously. What do you think that is? Because you know, you're not the first person I've heard almost say that, because it's almost like I feel like it's this weird thing. I feel like as artists, people almost like until you get external validation, it's like because people convince you for so long, at least in my experience, people convince you for so long, hey, look, art, that's not a job. You know, hey, writing poetry, that's not a job. So until it's like, what do you think that is where it's like, until you get that external validation through like a publication, till someone acknowledges it? Why do you think that is, that that's really what made you like be like, okay, this is really what I want to do?
um, I think, well, I think like obviously like most of us in the Western world in particular like grew up in a culture where like creative work isn't valued at all. Because it's not like I think success is measured so much by like financial achievements
Mm, mm-hmm.
that I people think that you cannot be successful ever in a lot of creative fields, and I think that was a huge part of it. But I also think like poetry in particular is so like has traditionally been so elitist and so um people gatekeep it a lot, and it's been something that like unless you write about certain things and you look a certain way, you're just not taken seriously at all. And I think
Mm.
like because other people didn't take me seriously and didn't take um kind of the things that I was writing about, like one of your questions later, like you can ask about sexuality and stuff. And like that's been a huge part of what I write about because it's like a huge part of my life. And I think writing about those kind of topics is like kind of dismissed as like pornography in a very like negative way. And you know, like there was no way that I knew like now, like having been published, especially in queer spaces, I understand how valuable it is to create work about sexuality and to create queer work. But you know, like I had no way of knowing that that would be important to anyone but me when I was younger.
For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Kind of going off on that. So you were first noticed at the age of 18 by the Queer Words Project Scotland, where you won a mentorship through them with Rachel Plummer. So for you, what was that experience like, and how did that experience, in your opinion, do you feel like you said, you got first published, and that's when you said, okay, wow, all right, I can really do this. That experience at age 18, being noticed and then being mentored with Rachel Plummer. Tell us, what was that like, and then what do you think that experience? How did that change the trajectory of now your career with writing?
Well, it was very exciting. Um, I think it was kind of like the main reason why I got into poetry like at all.
Mm,
Um, because I only submitted to it because one of my university tutors told me about it. And I was like, oh, I might as well. And being mentored by Rachel Plummer, she like again was one of those people who really like valued my work and took it seriously and encouraged me to take it seriously, and kind of like told me to put myself out there. And like she took me to my first reading in Edinburgh at like books, and kind of introduced me to people, and told me like how to submit for things. Because again, like a lot of people, a lot of my friends now ask me like, oh, how do you even like get published in poetry? Because people just don't know how to
Hmm.
submit. Like they don't know that like
Yeah.
publications are out there. They don't know that it's like actually quite easy to submit to stuff. Um, and yeah, I think like at the time, like when I first got published by Queer Words Project Scotland, I thought that it was kind of going to be a one-off thing, and then there were just kind of like opportunities that kept arising, and like now it's still going. So I think I've learned to like just take it seriously and put my time into it, and because it's been really rewarding.
Absolutely. Because you touched on something there that I think is very important. A lot of people don't even realize how to get that process going for
Yeah.
publishing. So many people probably don't even look at, again, maybe poetry as a career, because there's just such a
Yeah.
unknown, well, I'm a closet poet, whatever, I've been writing for years, but it's how do I even get that started? And I think so many people have that same story of, well, how do I even get my feet on the ground? How do I even get my feet running? How do you even get them wet? So I think it's so important for you, for people to hear people like you say that, where it's just, what, I just put myself out there with these projects around where I was, got a mentorship, and that's really what got me going, even as young as 18. So I think that's so great to hear. So let's move a little bit more into now your art, your bread and butter. You write and you make art that's explicitly erotic. Tell us what that means for you, and what are you exactly trying to say through both those words and images of the erotic?
So I think again, like when I started writing about kind of like erotic topics, it wasn't super conscious. Like I was just writing
Mm,
the way I perceived the world. Um, but now I'm more conscious about it. And um, like for me, like it's really important to be sex positive, especially about like lesbian sexuality and um, like sexual experiences that um, include and uplift transgender people as well. Um, that's really important to me because there's not a ton of um, like queer smut out there that's like good and that's like um, interesting, and like yeah, I think it's important to me because it's like my truth, and
yeah.
I also think like I like the way I exist in society, like I'm quite often quite a highly sexualized person. Um, and like when I go to like poetry events and stuff, like people often tell me that like even if I'm not reading something super sexual, I think people perceive my performance as quite sexual. So it's like it's kind of like an area in my life that I've had to get comfortable with, and being able to write about sexuality on my own terms has been like a source of power for me and a source of like reclaiming it for me as well.
For sure. For you, making art that is, like you said, you come into these spaces and you're just inherently perceived as sexual. What do you think about that type of niching that you get? What do you think about that? Is that more so? Do you feel like that's been, in what ways do you think that's been, I guess one could say maybe pros and cons? What do you think about that inherent like sexuality that people label you as immediately? Is both do you find that both a negative and positive? What are your thoughts on that?
I think um I think it really depends, because if it's a space I'm comfortable in, and if it's a space that is like queer and kind of safe, I
Mm,
feel very positive about it, because I think it's something that helps me connect with people. And I think it's also, like, to be honest, a huge part of like why people are drawn to me and drawn to my work, you know. I think it would be like a bit naive not to acknowledge that. But I think at the same time, like there's a lot of spaces in poetry that I like no longer frequent or
mm,
no longer return to, because like especially spaces where there have been like more men, and like more white men in particular, I feel that there's no I feel very fetishized, and I feel also that my work isn't being heard. Like when I'm in like queer spaces and safe spaces, I know that although I'm being perceived sexually, my work is still being listened to and it's still being heard and received. And I kind of have a degree of autonomy in it. But when I like enter other spaces, people just see me as like the body and as the face and as like the clothes I'm wearing, especially because I am high femme, and they don't like have any nuance or interest in like engaging with that beyond their own projections, I think.
mm, mm. For sure. Yeah, it's a very kind of yeah, it's I can understand and relate in some ways to what you're saying. Yeah, it's one of those things. I feel like our in terms of our spaces, we still have so much to deconstruct with so many different people, different bodied people. And yeah, I feel like there's just we still have such a far way to go, like in terms of deconstructing these things in these spaces to make them actually truly like where we can appreciate people and cherish them, but also respect them at the same time. Yeah, so much work to do. Oh my God. Well, you know what? On that note, so I really appreciate everything that you're saying so far, and you're really speaking to a lot of gems, and I think speaking to a lot of different things that I think that a lot of people can relate to. So let's kind of take it a little bit now to your pamphlet work. So you did pamphlets. Your first pamphlet, Red Ego, published in 2019, and then your second pamphlet, Natural Sugars, was published in 2020. So first off, tell us what is someone a pamphlet of poetry versus a chapbook? What is the difference that you're what's the difference between the two? Why go the pamphlet route as opposed to, let's say, the traditional chapbook?
um I don't know, is there a difference? I don't think I knew that there was a difference.
Oh, well, because you explicitly call it a pamphlet as opposed to just saying chapbook. So I'm curious if there's a bit of a difference between the two, or you would just consider them both the same.
I don't know, maybe it's like a cultural thing. I don't know if people maybe use chapbook more in America, or I don't know, I'm not sure. I think because like when I got into it, people kind of call pamphlet, like they use the word pamphlet and chapbook interchangeably, and
Ah,
oh.
yes, yes. Okay, yeah, maybe there's a bit of a cultural difference. Okay, wow. So, okay, then I'm curious for your pamphlet. What so 2019 Red Ego was published, and then 2020 Natural Sugars. For you, what was the that was a time during the pandemic when the pandemic had first hit. How was that releasing work during the pandemic during a time like that? Some published work. Did you run into any different challenges, or was that more so whatever may have you kind of just went straight through? What was that experience like? I'm so curious, releasing during the pandemic years.
Well, I guess it was mostly Natural Sugars that got released during the pandemic years, and obviously I kind of like was submitting it and knew that it was going to get published, I think before it actually like before the pandemic actually hit. Like I didn't know that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, it was a bit frustrating in that I think I didn't get to do as much in-person stuff with it as I would have liked.
Mm,
Um, and it was all very much online. But I think I did create like me and my partner, we created like a visual film, Natural Sugars
Wow.
on YouTube, which I guess was like my way of working around it. Um, and I think the pandemic, like kind of like everyone, I think it made me move my practice more online. But I think that's been kind of actually like a positive for me. I think like I've found that um, like expressing my practice online has helped me in a lot of ways to connect with people that I wouldn't have connected with in real life spaces, and kind of connect more with also like my own age group. You know, it's been,
Yeah.
it was okay. Yeah, it was okay.
Okay. It was definitely okay. So let's go let's turn into so now you're actually having so your debut collection. So this is your first, your turn to speak. So it's planned to be released in 2023. Tell us a little bit, what's that process been like, and like what shall we expect with your actual debut poetry collection? What should we expect, and tell us what's that process been like making your debut? It's your first.
Yep. So um originally the collection started as my dissertation piece for my last year of university.
Mm,
Um, and I wrote in the collection there's kind of like 3 acts. Um, and the center one is the one I wrote first. It's about, I think, 25 pages, and that was my dissertation. That's what I submitted as my dissertation. And then the first act is the proposal, which was like my actual real dissertation proposal.
mm,
Um, and then the final one is I wrote it in like the months after I graduated university. So um, it's been a much longer uh, creative process than my pamphlets have been. All my pamphlets, like I wrote them like in a month, 2 months. Like I wrote them pretty quickly,
mm.
um, because that's just how I like work. Um, with the pamphlets, like it's just one theme, and it's easier for me to just like get it all out. But with the collection, because it is so much longer and there's 3 acts to it, I think taking my time over that year to write it has really like given the collection more breathing space and
Mm.
more depth. And I really like that the final act of it was written later, because I think you can feel that when you read it. I think it creates more, there's more development, there's more growth, and especially because this collection, it's kind of like a poem play, like it's got all these Greek mythological characters in it.
Mm.
Um, it has given those characters space to grow and space to like be more fully fleshed and more dynamic. I think it's a much more dynamic and living piece of work than any of my poetry that I've written before. And I'm very excited for it.
Wow, wow, wow. When can people expect that in 2023? Top of the year, mid quarter, end of the year? What's the tentative release date plan?
So I've been told roughly around May.
Mm.
Um, so yeah.
Just about a year, so a year out from now. So I found that interesting, because you went in, you kind of talked about how it's having kind of that more time to write. It's giving the project more depth, more space to breathe. For you, what does that kind of correlate to that title, Your Turn to Speak? Does that directly kind of that when you say more space to breathe, it actually makes me think of your title, Your Turn to Speak. So it's like you've been waiting your turn, you've been waiting some time to finally really speak out what you're trying to say. Tell us a little bit about that title. What does that mean to you, Your Turn to Speak?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good observation. Yeah, that's kind of like the whole point of the collection in a lot of ways, because it is a rewriting of Greek myths and Greek heroes and gods and monsters. And like, I know, like, obviously, like, rewritings of these myths have been done so many times.
Mm,
Um, and like, now me rewriting them, it's like me, like, finally, I feel like um, writing about them so so much time later,
Mm.
like it's like they've been waiting, you know, like it's a huge part. Like I wanted to write a narrative that was like surprising and unusual and that went against the original mythology in
Mm.
a really way. And I wanted to write about, so like one of the characters is Sappho, and it's a huge part of like her narrative in it is about how the way her work is understood
Mm.
in a modern world is by the fact that her writing is now in fragments and that so much of it cannot be accessed because what she was writing was erotic and it was lesbian and it was silenced and it's been removed from the narrative. And it's like now she's been waiting to say these things. Like I
Mm.
rewrote Aphrodite as like a transgender he him lesbian in my collection, and that also is like a callback. Like it's yeah, it's about time, and it's about yeah, it's about waiting your turn and how and what that waiting does to your narrative and how people understand it and what it how it creates a dialogue, like that waiting.
I like that a lot. That's a very yeah, that's a double entendre meaning. It means a lot of different things. Absolutely. Your turn to speak, waiting your turn. I'm curious now, kind of from all that we've kind of talked about today with your background, your beginning stages, all those things. Do you feel like you've had to wait your turn to speak?
Um yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think um I feel like now in my life and in my social circles, um I feel that I'm really seen and I'm really heard and I'm really valued.
Mm.
But I think like a lot of people, I did not feel that growing up, like at all. And I didn't feel that I felt that the kind of writing that I wanted to do and the kind of creative expression that I wanted to do would never ever have a place in like a poetical narrative,
Yeah.
you know? And I feel like especially like obviously like thanks to like all the like lesbian writers and the people of color like who have come before me, I feel like there's been like a precedent set now where like people like me like can speak, you know, like I feel like there's obviously so much work to be done, but the world has changed, you know.
Absolutely. I love that a lot. I love that so much. And guess what? Now you're on the Poet Speaks podcast. Look at this
Yeah.
full 180, 360, whatever you want to call it, full circle moment. I love that a lot. I love that a lot. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I really love that. Yes, so many people have waited their turn to speak, but now it's your turn to speak. I adore that. So, Lady
Thank you.
Red Eagle, this has been such a great interview so far. So, I have some final questions for you before we wrap up. Tell me, what do you think people can truly take away from spoken word and poetry?
um I think people can take away the power of community and of um receiving, truly like receiving the people that we are listening to
Mm.
and the creators we are listening to. I think for me personally, like I've really moved away from my aspirations of like becoming mainstream, and I think
Mm.
and also like financial success, whatever that means. Like I think like commercial poetry is very stagnant, and that's why so many of us think it's not a real thing. But actually, like poetry in action and in real life and in these smaller like nonprofit spaces is very much alive, and it's very
Mm.
powerful, and it moves people and it calls people to action. And I think like it's kind of cliche to say, but like Audre Lorde's quote about poetry is not a luxury and her essay about that, like it's still very, very much applicable. And I think like we need to continue to utilize it as something that promotes um, social change and space to really like receive each other and love each other and like connect more as like a society.
Absolutely. I love that. Love that answer. Find a way to receive and connect with each other even more. I love that. All right. So, one final last question. Why do you need to get your words out?
Um, I think I think being able to express myself, even like regardless of how I'm interpreted and how I'm perceived, has really changed the way that I'm able to like experience the world. I think it makes me so much more of an active participant in my life and so much more authentic in the way that I move through the world. And it makes me able to have um like uh genuinely and like fully loving relationship with myself.
Mm,
I think like I've always been a very creative person and a lot of people are, and I think when you suppress that, it really makes you feel like you're not fully present in your life. You
yes,
know, it's
absolutely.
yeah. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I was literally, when you were saying that, my head is just nodding up and down the whole time. Yeah, I could totally agree with what you mean. When you're a creative person and you feel like you have to suppress that, you don't feel like you're
Yeah,
present in reality anymore. You don't feel like you're present in your reality anymore. And it becomes difficult to kind of, it's like seeing things in black and white versus seeing them in color.
yeah, completely.
It's like a diluted version of yourself in all these types of ways. So I can
Yeah,
totally agree with that. Yeah. Do you feel so you feel that way completely? That's why you need to get your poetry out.
yeah. I think like like when I started, like I was kind of posting my poetry on Instagram when I was like a teenager for a while and Tumblr and all of that. And you know, like even though it was like totally shit poetry, it really changed my life
Mm,
in that I think it like by doing that, it was an act of like fully accepting myself and accepting that like it is important for me to speak and it is important, like my experiences are important and it doesn't have to matter to someone else. It doesn't have to like be published or whatever. Like it like just the act of me saying that and the act of me expressing that
mm,
is already like life changing for me. And
mm.
I think it's life changing for a lot of people to just like speak, put it out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. So your her words they have changed her life. All right. Then there's a perfect way for us to end Lady Red Ego. Before we end though, please tell us what's 2022 and beyond looking like for your writing, everything else that you got going on, any type of events, any type of ideas, visions. And then lastly, tell us where can we find all of your stuff? Please give us your links, websites, all that good stuff.
So I think moving forward, I have a fictional trilogy that I've been working on throughout university that I'm sort of coming close to finishing. And um, I'm really excited for that. I think that'll be like a huge step forward for me when I eventually do get that done.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, my collection is coming out. I think I'm also moving more into digital spaces and putting more work on my website, which is www.ladyredigo.com. Um, and I'm in the last few weeks, I've been working more on creating lesbian short stories because I think my friends and the people who like my stuff would really enjoy that, and there's just not enough of it out there. Um, so I've been kind of making steps towards creating a Patreon for that. So yeah, all my links are Lady Red Ego on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and yeah, and YouTube.
Perfect, perfect. All right, everyone. So Lady Red Ego, her links will be in the YouTube channel in the description box. please go to the Poet Speaks podcast YouTube page and check out all her links. They'll be in the YouTube channel's description box of her episode. Lady Red Ego, thank you so much for being a guest today on the Poet Speaks podcast.
Thank you. This has been really nice. You're really good at interviewing.
I appreciate that. Appreciate that so much. All right, everyone, please go check out all of Lady Red Ego's amazing work. Everyone, please go check out the Poet Speaks podcast everywhere that you can find podcasts. Again, we are the #1 spoken word podcast in the world. Don't forget about it, okay? Check us out everywhere. All right, everyone, this is the Poet Speaks podcast, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.